Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, it's Mark Graban here. Welcome to episode 405 of the podcast. It is March 12th, 2021. Normally, I would have released this episode next Wednesday, but I wanted to accelerate this episode a bit because we are doing this in advance of two opportunities that are coming up right away. So first off, our guest is Deondra Wardelle. You're going to learn more about her when we get started. You can find links to everything we talk about here, and you can learn more about Deondra and her work by going to leanblog.org/405. But I have two discount codes to offer you. First off is KataCon7, which is brought to us by our friends at Lean Frontiers. That is taking place next week. Deondra is going to be one of the two hosts for the virtual event, March 15th to 19th. You can register using code LF10, or that's LF10, to get 10% off. You can go to leanfrontiers.com/KataCon7. And then Deondra is doing a workshop on Saturday the 13th. She'll be doing more of these in the future. A workshop on visioning, as she will talk about a little bit in the episode. The link to register is in the show notes, or again, go to leanblog.org/405. You can use code LEANBLOG to get 20% off of her workshop. And it's only $75 to begin with. So I hope you will check that out. So here is our episode with Deondra Wardelle talking about what she describes as, and others describe as being a quote unquote Kata geek. And so again, I hope you'll check out KataCon7. Thanks for listening. We're joined today by Deondra Wardelle. She describes herself on her LinkedIn page as a visionary, a coach, a strategist, a speaker, a consultant, a Kata geek, the leader of the hashtag root cause racism movement, and that she's passionate about developing a world of problem solvers. Now, I read that to you knowing that all of those things are true from having gotten to know Deondra over the past year. So I'm not afraid to say any of that. Deondra, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I'm glad we can have the conversation. You call yourself a Kata geek. I will do my best. We'll geek out together, though. How's that?
Oh, that sounds like so much fun.
A little more about Deondra. She is president and CEO of her own firm. You can learn more about Deondra and her work at her website, deondrawardelle.com. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. She started that last year. If you are a listener to the Lean Whiskey podcast series that I normally do with Jamie Flinchbaugh, Deondra was a guest with the both of us late last year, episode 23. So this isn't the first podcast we've done together.
No, it's not. And speaking of which, that was so much fun and a perfect way to kick off the holidays. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that was fun. And we won't talk about whiskey today, but just for background, Indianapolis is home for Deondra. The office you see there is located with our friends at Lean Frontiers, but you are from a prime bourbon place, if you want to tell the audience real quick.
Absolutely. So home for me is Louisville, Kentucky. Although I was born in Compton, California, I grew up and was raised in Louisville, Kentucky. So that is, Louisville is known, of course, for the Kentucky Derby and great bourbon.
Yes. And I learned something today. I knew you were from Louisville. I didn't know you were born in California. That's not too far from where I'm sitting right now.
Yep. California is my birthplace. Lived there until I was a toddler.
Small world.
It is.
As we've moved around, I'm glad we've crossed paths. And a couple other things coming up before we get into the conversation. Deondra has a role next week as one of the hosts of the annual KataCon event. This is KataCon7, March 15th to 19th. You can still register. They're describing it. I'm going to ask you to tell us more, Deondra, a pajama pants conference, right?
Absolutely. So it is going to be so much fun. what I appreciate about it being referred to as a pajama pants conference is, of course, this will be our first time gathering virtually. And we want people to still have that connection, the opportunity to network, have fun, of course, learn, but in a really relaxed environment. And so the folks at Lean Frontiers are some true marketing geniuses and coming up with the whole pajama pant theme. And what is even really cool, I have my Kata Geek button, which has the flannel design in the background. So I've got to find some pajama pants to match my button for next week.
That is clever of them. The website, if people want to learn more and go and register, leanfrontiers.com/KataCon7. And a lot of that is, do I have it right from what I've read? A lot of it is on demand.
I know it will be. It will actually be live. It will be hosted via Zoom, and in typical KataCon fashion, the presentations, recordings of the presentations will be available afterwards, and then people are able to download the presentations in advance. So all of that is available through the Lean Frontiers website, which you'll share in the notes.
Yeah. So leanfrontiers.com/KataCon7. If people are concerned about schedule and timing, that's my concern too. You can still get a lot out of it if you can't attend live. And then one other thing, and we'll talk more about Kata, and we'll probably come back to KataCon. But one other thing I want to mention here is a webinar that Deondra is going to be presenting on March 24th. This is part of the KaiNexus Continuous Improvement webinar series. You can register at kainexus.com/webinars. In a nutshell, what is the webinar going to be, Deondra?
So in a nutshell, it's Kata in the community. There is a play on words there. It will cover the basics of the Toyota Kata for anyone who may be new or have recently started their journey in learning about the Toyota Kata. So it'll cover the 4 steps of the improvement Kata. I'll also share some things that I've learned as a result of being a member of the community. One of the things that we practice and remind people is that you should have a coach and be a coach. And so I've really been fortunate to have been coached by some of the best among the Kata community. So I want to share some of those golden nuggets, not only from my experiences, but of course, some takeaways from KataCon7. And then the last part of that webinar is talking about how Kata plays well in the community and some of my own experiences as well as other colleagues who have, taken Kata to the streets. And so I'll talk about that in the webinar.
Well, great. Well, I look forward to that. And again, encourage people to register kainexus.com/webinars. And then, one other, just to touch on briefly from the introductions, Deondra and I have had a chance to collaborate over the past year on a project she's dubbed Root Cause Racism. So that's not our main topic for today, but I encourage you to go check out her website at www.rootcauseracism.com.
Yes. It's a lot of good stuff to check out.
Yeah, there's a lot to check out. So we'll get into the conversation. If I have one question on this podcast that I tend to ask everybody, and I'll ask you, Deondra, how did you first get introduced to Lean? What was some of the timing and the context, where you were working and how you learned about Lean or continuous improvement? Because this predates Kata being a popular phrase, right?
Right. So I was first introduced to Lean continuous improvement officially. Goodness, it's been more than 20 years ago. Yeah, more than 20 years ago. So like when I was a toddler. But I was actually working at the time, it was called Jabil Global Services. It's an electronic repair company. And the site director at the time was a huge proponent and supporter of 5S. And started, he started us on our Lean journey and introducing everyone throughout the warehouse and the office environment to 5S. And so typically whenever there were any special projects, I would, and that's what this was labeled as at the time, the special projects, I was tapped on the shoulder to assist. And I just learned so much working with the gentleman's name is Scott Stevens. We're connected even now on LinkedIn. I learned so much from that experience, and I was bitten by the lean bug. And then as time progressed, I was introduced to Lean Six Sigma formally through the training and certification programs that were offered at Jabil. And so that's how I first got introduced. And then it began to grow from there. And I'd say I really got more involved, of course, after receiving the certifications. But when I became the training manager for the site, a primary goal for myself, as well as the site director at that time, Mitch Lewis, it was really important for every employee to be introduced to Lean. And so, although there was an online training module, we decided that to make it impactful and to promote engagement, that those modules will be transformed into classroom training, and we rolled it out to the entire site. So not only were we teaching the methodologies, but showing people how to apply them in their workplace. And the rest is history.
And you've done all kinds of things. When you talk about workplaces, you've worked in manufacturing, you've worked in other settings. What have you learned along the way in terms of similarities where you say, okay, yeah, lean is lean, kata is kata, similarities, differences as you've navigated different organizations?
So, and you're right, I've worked in a number of organizations and in different industries. So whether it's been banking, retail, manufacturing, the nonprofit work, the one thing that remains consistent, it always goes back to the people. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to tapping into that creativity that is within everyone, regardless of their title or their responsibilities, and recognizing that that creativity that lies within, getting people more engaged in the process, in the work, showing how what they do every day connects to the objectives and the goals of the organization and how they're a key part of that, and making sure that people have the voice and the means to recommend ways to improve a process and to sustain those improvements. So, just that common theme, no matter if, I've worked in industries or organizations where it's heavy lean, it was heavy Six Sigma, it was heavy lean and Six Sigma, or they were new on their journey and they called it something different. But it always comes back to the people, developing people to improve processes to satisfy customers.
Yeah, that's well said. And that's all, I think, kind of a good reply when somebody hits you up with the whole, the statement of, well, we don't make cars here. That was true at Jabil. That's true at Boeing for people who have worked there. That's true in healthcare because it's not about building cars.
No. And even, Toyota talks about how it's not about, building cars. It's, it's engaging the team members to think and be creative and develop those skills. And I think it's funny that you say that we're not building cars or this is not a manufacturing environment. And it's because of that, I've set it as my goal and mission to help show people how, lean is everywhere. Continuous improvement is everywhere. And I've been very fortunate where I've been able to lead others in applying lean to different volunteer organizations, nonprofit organizations, companies that are heavy service. They don't deliver a product and it still works. And why does it work? Because no matter where you are, there's some type of process that you're following, whether it's documented or based on tribal knowledge. There's always people. And at the end, you're trying to deliver a product or a service to whether it's a customer or the community that you service. So it all connects.
And, when you say lean is everywhere, just to explore that a little bit. Lean can be anywhere, but unfortunately, there are too many organizations where they're not focused on people development. They don't tap into the creativity of everybody in the workplace, regardless of role or education level or other distinguishing factors. So right there, that's part of the opportunity to to close some of the gap between the current state and the ideal that we would be shooting for, right?
Yeah, and you know what, Mark? I'm so glad you clarified that point, because when I start talking about lean or continuous improvement with a fellow lean geek, I'm calling you it since we're geeking out today, and so sometimes I'll look through things from rose-colored glasses, and I think about, especially like some of the features that I do on Hi-Fi Friday. One of the goals is to spotlight not only people who are in the continuous improvement or lean community who know the terms and things like that, but those people who don't consider themselves to be a lean practitioner, but they're looking for ways to continuously improve. They're demonstrating respect for people. And although they may not know the exact terms or may not have a certification, they're practicing lean. And to your point, those organizations and environments where opportunities like that don't exist, the ideal state is that at some point that they will recognize and see the importance of incorporating lean as a part of their business practices.
And I think, Deondra, you're right to point out, that optimistic view of intuitive lean or things that remind you of lean, where people from different perspectives have similar ideas. Like some of these ideas are not exclusive to lean. They go back millennia of having a focus on developing people. There are plenty of organizations that do that without using lean terminology or saying they're inspired by Toyota. There are organizations where there is a very strong, healthy, thankfully, respect for people. So there are different origins for that. So there's that gap, but then there's also sometimes that nice discovery of, okay, well, this seems like lean. Whatever label we're going to put to it, it's good.
Right. Yeah.
So for those who aren't watching on YouTube, you see Deondra has so many great pairs of glasses that she wears. These are not literally rose.
No, they're not literally rose colored. Not today. Although I do have a pair of rose-colored glasses, but that's a topic for another podcast.
We'll do a podcast about glasses
and fashion.
Sometime.
Yeah,
it's a different audience. But so when you talk about it, always going back to the people, if somebody were to ask you, Deondra, from the context of lean and Kata and related frameworks, what does respect for people mean to you?
So respect for people, what that means to me, and this ties into another aspect of some of my work that's really important to me, and that's connecting people to their purpose so that they can achieve their goals. And so what respect for people means is, just providing people a space and an opportunity where creativity can flourish, where they're allowed to experiment and test and try new things and not worry about fear of failure, recognizing that whatever it is they want to pilot or whatever it is that they want to attempt, it's an opportunity for learning. And whenever there's that opportunity for learning and where creativity can be openly expressed, well, then that's an opportunity for a person to develop and become the best that they can be, not only in whatever role they hold in an organization, but in life. And what greater way to demonstrate respect for people than creating opportunities where a person can be the best that they possibly can be.
Mm-hmm. That means, the best they can be in their role and developing people and giving them skills that they can use to advance in their careers and do better things, and problem solving and other lean methods really help equip somebody to be more successful, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And, and if you look in organizations where I have worked, oftentimes, the challenge can be, finding the talent when there are these openings or opportunities for advancement. And so, creating, having a lean environment where respect for people is demonstrated. Part of that is, like you said, providing those educational opportunities, learning about lean methodologies, lean principles, other tools, or what have you, so that that person can build their resume, so to speak, so that when opportunities for advancement become available, they can be ready for it. Helping to prepare people for succession planning or, whatever it is that they aspire to do. But, when you have those type of environments that look at continuously improving, and moving closer to that ideal state and involving people, all of that ties in and all of that works together. And, not only does it help the people who work within that company or organization, it's good for business. It's good for the customers, so it's an opportunity to be a win-win for everyone.
And I think, lean provides a lot of win-win scenarios, or allows us to break down what might have been perceived trade-offs. People in manufacturing might say, well, we can't afford better quality. Like, well, it doesn't have to be more expensive. Mm-hmm. In healthcare, people might say, well, there's going to be a trade-off between patient safety and cost. I'm like, well, that's not really true.
Right.
Either. And I think that's the beauty of this. It allows us to say and instead of or when we have these different goals.
Exactly.
So let's talk about Toyota Kata. So I know you and others call yourselves Kata Geeks. I should have worn it. I have a T-shirt that says Lean Geek.
Okay.
So I don't mind to me the geek label. It's like, okay, fine, I'll embrace that. So becoming a Kata geek. I mean, we heard a little bit about your lean origin story, Deondra. What do you remember when you first heard about Toyota Kata? How did you really get pulled into all of this?
Absolutely. So it was when I was in the printing and paper industry, and one of the things that I commend, anyone who grew up in the industry. They sometimes say that they have ink in their veins. It's that work is really looked at as an art form, and there's of course the creativity, but at times there can be some variation, and with that variation, it can lead to a number of opportunities for improvement. And so I remember at one point in time, I was working with some teams, and they were having challenges, with some of the variation that they were experiencing within the processes that, caused a gap in terms of what the customer expected and what the customer received. And so at the time, I was responsible for continuous improvement for all of our sites in North America, Europe, and Asia. And one of my team members, avid reader, came across the book to the Toyota Kata, and his name is Mike Jones. And Mike said, Deondra, you have got to read this book. A lot of what we've been talking about and applying, lean to problem solving and developing people and, addressing, different challenges that we're seeing in the work. The Toyota Kata addresses it, and it's in such a user-friendly way. He said, I really believe that the organization would embrace it. And I said, sure, I'll check it out. So it was like a page turner. I could not put the book down. And after that, I had to learn more about it. So as it turned out, not too long after that, as I was, online, learning as much as I could about, Mike Rother and his work, I ran across an opportunity to register for KataCon. And that was my first KataCon. And just that experience of hearing people, how people in other companies had applied Kata when they had tried a number of other different methodologies that they try to introduce broadly across an organization. But the approach that it was, working on developing one learner at a time through one storyboard, and just how practical the steps were to addressing whatever issue, no matter the industry. I just became totally hooked. And then not only that, at that first KataCon is when I I had my first coach, Tracy Defoe, who I talk about often. And just the community in and of itself, people are so open to help one another. They're so, eager to answer questions or provide whatever assistance. And I remember returning to the office after KataCon, like any question that I had, any information that I needed, it was just a phone call or an email away, reaching out to anyone, including Mike Rother himself. And so just the way that the community became interested in the work that I was doing with the company at the time and wanting to ensure that we were successful and what it is that we were trying to accomplish, I was sold after that. And so, I've been through every online training, the training that's offered by Dr. Leiker and, begin to follow Thilo Schwartz and his work, Dorsey Sherman, just a number of great people, Karen Ross, like I said, who just are so open to sharing information and being helpful to others. And in turn, I was able to share that information with the organization where I was employed. And not only there, but different organizations where I volunteer. If we had a great challenge or some big aspiration that we were trying to reach, we were able to apply the steps to Kata and accomplish it. And so, and I often say that the Kata changed my life because it really impacted how I operated as a manager. Although I felt like I was someone who was pretty open and, very collaborative, I didn't realize how much of a micromanager I was until I introduced the Kata even internally within my team. And, the relationships that grew and the trust that grew as a result of practicing the Kata was amazing. I know I kind of talked a little long and answered that question, but
no,
I just I really get excited. I'm really passionate about, what it is the Kata can do. And it's a game changer.
Yeah. Hey, don't apologize for having or sharing that passion. That's what the podcast is about here, for people to come and share that.
Okay, good.
With people. For those who are just listening and not watching, when Deondra says she couldn't put the book down, it's over her shoulder. She doesn't let it get far away.
I do not. And I have let, I will let people borrow the book, but they have to sign it out. There's this whole process they have to go through because Mike has autographed the book and you can't see it, but in front of the book, it's a mug, and the mug is from the 5-question coaching card that's used as a part of the Improvement Kata, Coaching Kata. So yes, very, very near and dear to my heart and right over my shoulder in the background here.
You are very trusting to lend out that copy instead of having a second copy just for lending.
I know it was actually in the last company where I worked. It was a member of the IT department. And what I noticed about her is that how she operated, although she had not been formally introduced to Lean, she was operating in such a way that she demonstrated that she understood, the principles or what have you. And so I didn't talk about the Kata openly because in that environment, they were relatively new on their continuous improvement journey. So I would drop little breadcrumbs here and there, and she was just so eager, and she was someone who was trusted, and so I let her borrow the book, and she returned it safe and sound. So,
and hopefully they respect you enough to bring it back.
Oh, absolutely.
So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little, Deondra, a little bit when you talked about how Kata helped you be less of a micromanager. Can you kind of walk through a scenario, thinking back to a time where Deondra 1.0 might have micromanaged and Deondra 2.0 maybe utilized Kata and engaged people differently?
Absolutely. So Deondra 1.0, I like that. So Deondra 1.0, during that phase, I felt like I had to have all the answers or I was failing my team. I was not a good leader. So if a member of my team came to me and asked a question, if I didn't immediately know the answer, or if I couldn't give them direction, or if we're working on a project, if I didn't have a complete outline of what we should be doing step by step, I felt like I was failing them or overburdening them. And so, like I said, I perceived myself to be, a very open, honest, easy to work with type of manager. But I did not realize how much I was stifling the team and holding the team back. And the eye opener for me was, of course, after, being exposed to the Kata, and early on when I started out as a learner and had my own storyboards, and was really trying to, and, poor Tracy, she deserves an award because I always knew what I wanted to accomplish. That whole discovery and the unknown, I didn't like being in that area. And so she would really have to work with me on not jumping ahead, but going through the steps and identifying my target condition. But early on as a learner and as a new coach, and I started out with coaching my team, I remember there was a project that the team was working on, and I said, you guys are empowered. You're making the decisions. I'm a resource. I'm here to help you out. And I remember early on, they drafted one of the team members to come approach me. And they said, Deondra, before we get too far into this, we want to get your opinion on it. And I was like, well, you guys are working on it. Whatever you decide is fine. He was like, no. We know how you are. You're a perfectionist.
Oh.
We don't want to get too far in. Just tell us how you want it. And and I was like, that is not a good way to lead a team. And so that began to open my eyes. And even as, I started working with the team individually on their storyboards or whatever target condition they were trying to reach with whatever they wanted to accomplish. If I thought I knew what the next step would be, or if I thought I knew what the answer should be or what the answer was, I would bite my tongue. I did not want to impose that on them and interrupt their experience and interrupt their learning. And all the time, 9 times out of 9, whatever step they took or whatever they planned to do or whatever idea they came up with was 100 times better than what I had envisioned at the time. And so that freed me up to become Deondra 2.0 and realize you don't have to have all the answers. And part of being a good leader is, setting your team up so that they can be successful, that they can grow, that they can identify, the solutions to whatever it is that they're trying to resolve, and just coach them along the way, to reaching those points without giving them the answers, or feeling like I had to have the answers. So that's how I've evolved. And I would even say now, I'm maybe even Deondra 4.0, because the more I practice as a coach and even as a learner, I continue to evolve and have, new epiphanies, as to how all this works.
Yeah. Well, that's why, it's all about continuous improvement.
Right.
New version numbers, new releases.
Absolutely.
But what you're describing there, sounds, these are familiar organizational leadership dynamics. Like I think back to, someone I've interviewed a number of times from a different context, Dr. John Toussaint, tells a very similar story about his own evolution or transformation as a leader, from shifting from what he called in a medicine context being a white coat leader, of being all knowing, all powerful, telling people what to do, but and having to evolve. And then the other part of the story is familiar to where I think a leader, or even leaders before you, condition people to sometimes say, like I had someone ask, it was an interesting question. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure.
We talk about engaging people and involving them in improvement, whether that's using frameworks we label as Kaizen or Kata or A3 or whatever we call it. And somebody asked, well, what if your employees, what if people just say, no, I just want you to tell me what to do? And I think, well, they've been conditioned to feel that way, or they've been conditioned, and in a way it's easier when the boss just gives you the answer, and if they're wrong, you're like, oh, well, my boss stinks. And so getting people out of that old dynamic can be challenging. What are your thoughts on situations like that?
Yeah, I have observed situations like that where you do have employees that say, well, just tell me. And it's because of previous experiences where they may have tried to recommend something and it wasn't well received, or, it backfired on them in a sense. And so, they don't want to invite another scenario like that. And so they just want to, just let me do my work. Just tell me how you want it done so we don't have to have this back and forth, and without any disappointments. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate when there are situations that employees feel like, well, let me just do whatever it is you need to do to keep the peace and keep things moving so I can get back to work. Because when there comes a time when an employee reaches a stopping point, or they do have an issue where they need to collaborate with their manager, how comfortable do they feel escalating that issue or just trying to find a workaround on their own? And I think that can lead to, other potential problems even.
Sure.
When
all kinds of problems.
Oh yeah, all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
All kinds.
Because like you said, a lot of times, most of the time, the people doing the work have a better understanding of the situation. They can develop better solutions. So when they fall back into that, aye, Captain, I'll do whatever you say. I've seen in different workplaces that bad things happen, things that were preventable. So it's tough to get people out of that. So we can think of like starter culture change, or bringing it back to Kata, this idea of a starter Kata, which I think is interesting to me. You point to that coffee cup that has those questions, and in a way, some people learning Kata might say, "Well, just tell me how to do Kata." But okay, the starter Kata serves that purpose. But my understanding of it is we're supposed to we can eventually move beyond the starter Kata. We can evolve, adapt. What's your experience been, Deondra?
That's exactly it. So, the starter Kata provides the framework for the pattern or the behavior that you're seeking to develop. And, Kata comes from, that term comes from martial arts. It's not an acronym. And it's a way of doing. And, for anyone who has practiced martial arts, there's a set form of how you do things. And then once it becomes routine or a habit, you can modify it. Even if you think about, someone who's learning to play an instrument, they have to start out learning the basics. And then after you have the pattern pretty much set, then you can improvise and add other elements to it. And the same is true with the starter kata, and people feel weird. I can attest to this myself. I felt like I had to have the questions memorized. And so what would happen is I would go off script. And of course, there's a framework and a guideline with the questions. There are times when you need to go deeper. But early on, I may have skipped a question, because I wanted us, to feel like, oh, I've got this. And thankfully, I had a coach who was very patient and disciplined and would say, it's okay, Deondra, to read the questions as is. As a matter of fact, as part of that starter kata, it teaches that have that card in your hand, read it verbatim, because it helps to start to develop that practice and get familiar with the steps. But what I have experienced, and those who I've coached, and those who I've worked with, it becomes second nature. You realize you're going through the steps without having to read or reference anything, because it's become such of a pattern or practice of what you learned and how you've applied it to a number of different situations.
Yeah. So one other thing I want to kind of pick your brain on here, Deondra. So one thing I enjoyed the webinar that you did recently that was done through the Just in Time Cafe, and I'll post a link to the recording of that in the show notes around visioning and strategic vision boards. And part of my reaction to it, and I obviously want you to elaborate on this. I was reminded of, there's a quote from John Shook. Is it John Shook? No, it's Pascal Dennis. Pascal was former Toyota Canada. He's written great books, including Lean Production Simplified. I've heard Pascal say, lean is not just a scavenger hunt for waste. And I think that's thought provoking, because a lot of times, there is a lot of waste we can react to. We can solve problems. We can eliminate defects. But visioning comes at all this from, I think, a very different direction. So can you tell the audience about what you mean by visioning and strategic vision boards?
Sure. So in that webinar, I talked about visionary lean thinking. And, at the heart of lean thinking is about purpose and processes and people. And so, this visionary lean thinking for me has evolved over time, and it's touched the different areas that I've worked in and things that I've focused on. So, within any organization I've worked in, I've either participated or led the strategic planning process. And that starts with the vision. And then even with the steps of the improvement kata, we talk about the first step is the challenge, and that's the direction or whatever it is that we want to go in. And if you think about that in terms of what you see in a working environment, where you start at first is the vision. You have to understand, why are we in business? Why are we doing whatever it is that we need to do? And between the lean thinking, the visionary aspect, the steps of the plan, do, check, act cycle, and then Toyota Kata, all of that connected for me the first time I participated in a vision board workshop. And as a facilitator was sharing the steps to building our vision board, what she was saying was coming in one ear, but it was processing through my brain, with strategic planning and the kata and all of these other things. And then it came out in terms of like a strategic vision board. So with visionary lean thinking, it's really important to grasp or understand that vision, that ultimate purpose. What is it, the big aspirational thing, and I'm doing air quotes here, that we want to accomplish either in a business environment or personally. You have to have line of sight towards whatever this ideal state is. But then the way our brain works, if you think about this huge thing that you're trying to accomplish, it can be overwhelming. And I don't care who you are, it can just be overwhelming to where the brain starts to say, can you do this? And it may trigger these different things that will hinder us to trying to figure out, how do we even get started? And so that's where all of these aspects of lean, the plan, do, check, act cycle, and the kata come into play. That, yes, we have this big aspirational, or like the question that's asked in framing the challenge in the kata, wouldn't it be great? But then you step back and you look at the current condition. Where are you now? Where are we now? And then we want to set a target. What is the next step? What's the smallest bite we can take out of this big elephant of a challenge of whatever it is that we want to accomplish? And the thing about it is, it's good to have that vision, like I said, so that we can have that picture of what it is that we want to accomplish. But we may not know the intricate steps that we need to take to get us there. And that's where lean thinking, lean methodology, lean principles, the steps of the kata come into play, because they help to provide that path. And realizing it's not a straight path. It's not a smooth path. But it provides that path of experimenting, of testing, trying, learning, doing, and continuously doing that to take you along the way to accomplish whatever that vision is.
Yeah. It's an emergent path. It's not a matter of, so I think there are parallels. I mean, I hear parallels in what you're describing between visionary lean thinking, strategic vision boards. You've got to be proactive. You've got to be aspirational. Like, again, not just reactive. There are parallel, and then this path. What the knowledge threshold, is that the phrase that gets used a lot in the Kata speak?
That is. So the threshold of knowledge, that point of, where you don't know what's next. You've reached at that point where it's beyond your experiences. This is something you haven't done before. Some people refer to it even, this is unknown territory for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the one other parallel, I've interviewed a number of people on this podcast, including Eric Ries, about what they call the lean startup. Mm-hmm. And lean startup kind of flies in the face of the old entrepreneurial venture capital approach, was to ask every entrepreneur to develop, a 5-year business plan. I'm like, well, I think even the communists have stopped doing 5-year plans. Like, nobody has a crystal ball. So lean startup is really, I think, more about having a vision, having an aspiration, and then figuring out what are the small steps we can do to test our product market fit, to test our business model, to try to validate it. And so I imagine, whether you're calling it lean startup or Kata or what have you, you, Deondra, as an entrepreneur, are probably looking at the same thing. What is your vision for yourself and your company? Your crystal ball doesn't go out 5 years, I'm sure. No offense, right?
None. Listen, absolutely none taken. Because when and it's so funny, and that's the whole thing. It's great to have that vision because, like I said, that connects you with your purpose of why you're in business or why it is you want to do whatever you want to do. But with that strategy and execution, the two need to connect. And so with that, you talk about as an entrepreneur, and especially with 2020, who could have predicted all the things we experienced in 2020, but who can predict what we're going to experience in any year? No one has a crystal ball. Mm-hmm. So, the thing about having that vision is, ultimately where it is you want to go or what it is you want to achieve. But as 2020 throws whatever curveballs at you, you may swerve a little bit, but you know that you're on a path. You'll overcome that hurdle, you'll dodge that curveball or whatever it is, but you're clear about the direction that you're heading. And that's another reason why during that visionary lean thinking webinar, I talked about the connection with strategy and alignment. How, even in businesses, we have these strategic plans, these big overarching, wouldn't it be great, ideal states for business. And these plans that we may set a year or 2 years out or however long, but how does that cascade throughout the organization? And how does that translate to the employees with the work that they do every day? And ensuring that they can clearly see how that connects to the big vision, because that is what helps to spark the creativity and helps to promote, the engagement and the buy-in from those who are doing the work, because they see that the work they're doing, the tactical day-to-day things along with the improvements, all connects with a vision. And, and like I said, that doesn't only apply to work, it applies to personal. And even as an entrepreneur, when I set out on this journey in September, a direction that I thought I would be going into, I've kind of turned the corner and dipped and made some other things. But ultimately, my vision is to create a world of problem solvers. So the different things that I'm doing, although they may be changing, they're still aligned with that path of, putting lean and continuous improvement and the Kata in everyone's hands.
Okay. Yeah. So if you want to follow up and learn more about what Deondra is teaching and coaching people on, do check out that webinar from the JIT Cafe. And Deondra, you often run workshops. People want to take a deeper dive. So people can learn more about that at DeondraWardelle.com, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
And so last segment here before we'll have to wrap up. And I'm going to ask you in advance, let's do more episodes as different topics come up over time, okay?
Deal.
Good. So when you talk about community, one community that Deondra and I have both been a part of, we call it the Lean Communicators. We have a website, leancommunicators.com, where you can find podcasts, including this one. You can find currently Deondra's main form of one of her forms of communicating is her YouTube channel. So that content is embedded in there. Again, leancommunicators.com. The High Five Friday videos, tell the audience a little bit about that if they haven't seen these that you put out on Friday.
Sure. So I have to thank my good friend, another member of the Kata TWI community, Panos Efsta, for challenging me to start doing more videos because I was nervous about being in front of the camera. And so, I started out doing these videos, and what I wanted to do was just give a high five to those people who are using Lean to make a difference, whether or not they were, a member of the Lean community, a Lean practitioner, or if they were new on their journey. And what started out as a project I absolutely enjoyed. It's the highlight of the week. And so it's very quick videos, and it includes more information about the person or the organization who is featured. I usually also write a blog about them. Those blogs are available on my website, DeondraWardelle.com. But every week, it's an opportunity to point a light at someone who's doing really meaningful things, where they may see it as something small, but it's having such a huge impact. Within manufacturing, outside of manufacturing, a number of different industries, and in the community. And I just have so much fun doing those videos and spotlighting the work of others.
Yeah. And there may be a podcast in the future, or you've got different ideas. Deondra often says, I've got ideas.
Yes. Yeah. So I have an idea, and I'm so torn. There's like 8 different podcasts I want to do. And that's, of course, it's not realistic. Wouldn't it be great if I could do 8 podcasts? I don't know. But for one, as a result of being a member of the Lean Communicators community, and I see, just all the education, the good information, the tools that you and so many others in that group share through your podcast, I think potentially could High Five Friday evolve into a podcast where I would interview those guests, and we can take, just learn more about what it is they're doing and how it is that they're applying Lean, or if they're new on their Lean journey, what they're discovering that could potentially help someone else. I don't know, Mark, so much to think about. I'll probably have to do a Kata storyboard about it.
Yeah. We'll keep talking about that, and I'm sure there's going to be exciting things ahead. The other community I wanted to mention is Women in Lean. And gosh, we should get together a panel of some of the members of Women in Lean and do an episode together. In a nutshell, what is the Women in Lean group? How can women who are listening learn more?
Sure. So the Women in Lean group, which is going into its second year, was founded by Karen Ross, Dorothy Sherman, and Crystal Davis, all giants in the field of Lean. And it is just a place that there's a group on LinkedIn. It's called Women in Lean. Anyone who's interested in joining, you just search for it and you join, and you're welcome. And it is a place for women to come to learn, to share, to support one another. It is a fabulous community, and there's so much I could say about it, but periodically we've started doing these things called interchanges. That's something that started happening last year. And there are these online conferences, and you learn so much. We really could, you could take away a CEU credit from how much you learn. And, the contribution is you have to be willing to participate. So there was a number of people that do these really short presentations or, a topic review. And it's just a really great community for growth and learning for Women in Lean.
Well, good. Well, I hope people will check that out. And I apologize. There's a scheduling error on my part, so we're a little squeezed on time. So I apologize to you for that, Deondra. Our guest has been Deondra Wardelle. And just to recap a couple of things that are coming up. KataCon7, March 15th to 19th, virtual pajama pants event. You can go to leanfrontiers.com/KataCon7 to learn more about that. Deondra is doing a webinar in the KaiNexus series. I'll be hosting and moderating, but we're going to have Deondra presenting about Kata in the community, March 24th. You can register for that, kainexus.com/webinars. And even if you're listening to this after the 24th, you can find the recorded webinar there or on our YouTube channel for KaiNexus. And Deondra's websites are rootcauseracism.com and DeondraWardelle.com. So Deondra, I'm really glad we could do this. If I'd said, wouldn't it be great if I could have Deondra on the podcast? Well, here we have.
Here we have it. So again, thank you for having me. This has been so much fun, Mark. It's always great to talk with you.
Well, likewise. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.